As we start, let me remind everybody, if you've got a electronic device with you, to put it on, turn it off or put it on mute. I would appreciate it. Thank you. Somebody will get ready to start.
Yeah.
We're going to start.
Okay.
Mills County Commissioners Court is in session this 13th day of December 2021. If you would join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear God, as we meet today to consider the issues facing Mills County, please grant us wisdom and guidance in doing your will. And a little rain wouldn't hurt. We are grateful for all your blessings on the country and Mills County. In Jesus' name, amen. Present in the courtroom, we have, in addition to the county judge, Commissioners Wright, Parton, and Guerin. Commissioner Williams is attending via Zoom. He can participate, but he doesn't count toward a quorum there or vote. So therefore, there are 4 of the 5 members of the court present. That constitutes a quorum and a legal meeting. We also have present the county clerk, the county treasurer, and the county attorney, and our chief deputy. So with that out of the way, the first item on the agenda is a review of the minutes of November 29th. This was a special meeting on the 29th, as the court had the opportunity to review the minutes. Are there any questions or corrections on the minutes? Entertain a motion for approval.
I move we approve them. If nobody has any questions.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from Commissioner Guerin. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We've approved the minutes. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the redistricting of commissioner precincts. This has been advertised for 2 weeks in the Eagle. It's a requirement of the redistricting process. So with that, I would move we recess Commissioners Court to hold a public hearing and reconvene at the conclusion of the public hearing to take appropriate action and complete the rest of the agenda. Is there a second on the motion to recess? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, the Mills County Commissioners Court regular meeting is in recess, and I hereby call to order the announced and scheduled public hearing on Commissioner Precinct redistricting. On the screen, I want to just, for the benefit of the public, go through a little bit of background before we go much further. Question of why we're doing this. Let's go ahead and change the slide, Jackie. In this 2020 census, Mills County's population is reported at 4,458. That's down about 400 from the prior census. If you take 4,458 and divide it equally among the precincts, that's 1,115 people per precinct. It goes back to the concept of, one person, one vote. So in an ideal world, there'd be 1,115 people in each precinct. In our existing commissioner precincts, the population ranges. It varies. In precinct 3, which is our smallest by population, we have 977 people. In precinct 2, which is our most populous, we have 1,188 people, and the other 2 precincts are in the middle. The Texas Secretary of State requires redistricting if the cumulative variance across the precincts exceeds 10%. The cumulative variance in the existing Mills County Commissioner precincts is just over 24.5%. So redistricting is required. The goal of and the requirement is to redistrict the commissioner precincts so that the calculated variance on a cumulative level is less than or equal to 10%. So that's the numbers behind what we're doing. Let's change the slide, Jackie. The goals in doing this, and item 1 is a requirement. 2 and 3 are more local goals. The first thing is to move the census blocks to reduce the population variance between the precincts. This generally, actually, the census blocks don't move on the ground. What happens is the precincts line move over different census blocks. So in effect, a census block changes precincts. Generally, we need to add population to precinct 3 while reducing population in precinct 2. That's the big picture goal. There's some movement just as a matter of course in precincts 1 and 4 blocks, but the big goal to get the variance down has to be reducing 2 and adding to 3. Then the local goals, while we're accomplishing the required goal, is to attempt to maintain or equalize as best we can the mileage of the county roads maintained by each precinct. That's a primary responsibility of commissioner precincts. They have generally the same staff, the same equipment, and so the same budget. So they need to have generally as close as we can to the same road mileage or the same amount of work. And finally, I would like to minimize the number of people in the county having to change precincts. Change is always an issue. It changes things like who their elected commissioner is to where their polling place is. And so some of it's going to change, but we'd like to keep it to a minimum. So those are the goals as we dove into this. Let's change slides. We looked at 9 different scenarios on how to best do this. Only 4 of the 9 ended up meeting the 10% maximum variance goal. And we much like COVID, we decided to number them, except designate them with alphabet, but decided to use the American alphabet, starting with the letter A. Anyway, as we went through it, we were down to scenario G before we got one that met the 10% test. So G, H, I, and J all meet the 10% compliance test. So those are the possible alternatives. To just give you a thumbnail, it's up there on the slide. You can see the variance calculation that goes with G, H, I, and J, and they're generally range between 7.5% and 8% cumulative variance. Then tried to give a little narrative, and we'll look at the maps here in a minute, of how it impacted precinct 3. Remember, that's the primary goal, is to add people to precinct 3. The first scenario, before we get to the map, while I got this table up, adds 95 people to precinct 3. That gets it into compliance. Now, where do those people come from? You can see 15 come from precinct 1, 45 from precinct 2, and 15 from precinct 4. And it ends up with precinct 3 having a finger that runs south to about County Road 506. Precinct 2, which is now south of Lake Merritt, the north boundary moves south from Browns Creek to about County Road 510. And I won't go through all that narrative on each one, but scenario H adds 149 people to precinct 2, with 51 coming from, 103 from precinct 49 to precinct 3, with 103 coming from precinct 2. And it again has one of these south fingers. It's generally on the west side of 84 from Bozar almost down to Gulfway. And the north and west boundary of precinct 2 moves south. On I, it adds 88 to Commissioner Parkman's precinct 3, with precinct 2 dropping by 62, and a similar boundary move. And J adds 100 to precinct 2, with 75 of them, to precinct 3, with 75 coming from precinct 2. And this includes a large group of census blocks, generally between Highway 84 and west side of FM 2005, out of precinct 2 and into precinct 3. So that's the big picture of the possible scenarios. If we go to the next slide, you'll see some pros and cons before we get to the map. I don't know there's much to talk about here. Just might note that scenario H has the largest population impact, and scenario J has the smallest population impact as far as number of people moving from one precinct to the other. And scenario J has the least impact on county road mileage, which is already imbalanced in favor of precinct 3. But the big negative there is it includes a precinct to the polling place, and polling places have to be in their precinct. So this would involve changing a polling place, which is changed for everybody that voted there. So what we're doing is public input, and we'll run through the maps here in a minute, which will be the public hearing, just telling us your thoughts and observations on these scenarios. Then we will close the public hearing, and the Commissioner's Court will further discuss and take action on adopting one. We can only have one scenario. After that action, the final map will be published in the paper for a series of weeks. And the ultimate part is then the voter registration section of Mills County will be printing and mailing voter registration cards. That all needs to happen by the end of the year, early January. So that's what we're doing here today. Let's go on, Jackie. We're going to flip through the maps. Decided we're doing this electronically because it lets people see it best that aren't here, and even in the courtroom. We have them on most of them on plastic overlays we can put up here on a map in the courtroom if people want to come up and look at it that way. These are in order. This is scenario G, the first one I talked about. This, in each one of these, there'll be a high-level picture, which is this one, followed by a detailed centered around the city of Gulfway, which is where many of the small changes are. This I mentioned of precinct 3 is the orange, and I mentioned this scenario had a finger coming south. You can see that finger coming south, and that south boundary is about County Road 506. And precinct 2's northwest boundary comes south a little bit. So that is G. And Jackie, show us the detail now on G. there you can see it in Goldthwaite. What that's showing you is, then this goes back about 10 years to the last redistricting, I believe. Precinct 1, which is generally south of town, has a finger that comes up through Goldthwaite, through the city, and then goes out to the northwest a little bit. The green is precinct 4 coming in from the west, and it too comes into Goldthwaite, and precinct 2 from the east comes into Goldthwaite. You can see the one piece that's not there in Goldthwaite in this scenario is precinct 3. So now let's look at scenario H. Okay, you can see the difference between H and G is that finger coming south, that orange finger, that's precinct 3, and it's coming down almost into Goldthwaite. The right-hand side of it is 84. Oh, actually, I think it's the railroad tracks. And then it's coming down a county road on the west-hand side. So that pushes precinct 2 a little further east. And, that's the primary change there. Let's go to the detail on that, Jackie. There you could see that the finger coming south from precinct 3 toward Goldthwaite. Now let's look at scenario I. You can see the finger coming south, but not as far as in H. There's a little section where 3 wraps around the west side of precinct 1 up there in the upper left-hand corner. And then again, you see the northwest boundary of precinct 2 moving in a little bit. And the detail on that. So there you see where 3 of the 4 precincts are touching in the Goldthwaite area. And finally, scenario J. Well, I wish there was a way to get my Zoom screen out of the way, but what you can, the orange is precinct 3, and it drops way down into the blue of precinct 2. What it's done there is picked up that relatively large, it's about a 47 person census block between 84 and 2005. Think of it as when the Fellowship Baptist Church is in this, and it's the land between that side of 2005 back to 84. That's the difference on this one. So it's primarily a precinct 3 and 2 reallocation. Let's go to the detail in the city. And see, this doesn't show much of the change, because the change coming down into that 2005 84 area is off the map to the upper right-hand corner. So there's effectively, I don't believe there's change in where 4 and 1 and 2 are in the city of Goldthwaite. Let's back up one, Jackie. Okay, let's leave it there. I think we have, can't see, I think it might be I up on the map, J there. We ran out of Mylar before we got to J. So that's the maps, the overview, and this is supposed to be a public meeting and not a county judge hearing. So is there input from the public? Anybody like to speak to any of this? Yeah, would you mind coming up and using our microphone so the people that are not in the courtroom can hear you? Make sure it's turned on, and Sonia can help you if there's an on-off switch on the bottom of it. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, on the slide that had the pros and cons.
Yes, Jackie, can you back up to pros and cons?
I would like you to explain the pros and the cons. I'm looking at all of these, but I'm thinking it would help me to know the pros and cons of G. I see it says move both precinct 1 and 2 south. Is that the pro or the con? So I'm not real clear on that. So that would help me.
Okay. That's a good question. When we started this, there was one thought about it would help if every precinct had some exposure or population base in the city. And so if by moving precinct 1 and 2 south, in effect, the other side of that is it moves the boundary of precinct 3 south. And we were trying to see if we could get it into Goldthwaite, but the only G didn't do it. I don't know that there are big pros and cons of G, to be honest with you. That's about all it accomplishes. H, had a little more defined pros and cons. The con is it was changed for the most people. And the pro was it moved precinct 3 down closest into Goldthwaite. That finger on H came down within, to the north edge, almost out by, S&S and Ranchland in that area. And then I was easy. That moved the smallest number of people. That was the pro. The con of I, and I didn't write it down here, was that it gave them more road mileage, substantially more road mileage to precinct 3. And just to put that in perspective, you guys help me with this. I think precinct 3 currently has 128 miles of county road.
Precinct 1 has 109 miles.
Do you know? 112. So you see that we already have about 12 more miles of road to be maintained in precinct 3. And so we're trying some of these scenarios that work on getting the population count right, create, to throw another 8 or 10 miles into precinct 3 aggravates an imbalance that's already there. And that was what led to precinct J. This was one Commissioner Parton helped develop on Friday. That block I talked about between 2005 and 84, there are almost no county roads in it. The 2005 is a farm to market. We don't maintain that. Highway 84 is TxDOT again, so we don't maintain that. So it moved a lot of people to meet the legal requirement on the variance without changing the road mileage. Now, the inconvenience, and let me just let the clerk address this. Ms. Scott?
Well, I have a question. How many more miles does I put in precinct 3?
Do you remember?
I haven't played that one.
Is it significant? I mean, we don't want the gap to get wider. I get that. But when you're looking at J, you're going to take the people that normally have been voting at the Fellowship Baptist Church, and they're now going to be voting at Mullen.
Or somewhere else.
Or early voting.
Or somewhere else. Yeah. I mean, that's the third option, is to have another replacement polling place for precinct 2 that is close as possible to where the Fellowship Baptist Church was.
Okay. But those precinct 2 is still not driving past Goldthwaite. If you pick option J, you're going to take the people that live down
Let's
2015.
put option J back up, Jackie.
If you pick option J, Judge, can I get you to take your view bar and slide over to the other side, maybe?
How's that?
That works. Okay, So this is gonna take the people that live over here off 2005 behind, or to the north of 2005. And they're gonna either vote at early voting, or they're gonna drive to Mullen to vote. I don't. know how
Or
many-
you keep missing my third option, or we have a new polling place to replace.
That's gonna move all the Mullen people voting somewhere else.
Yeah.
So precinct 2 people, we can try to find maybe the livestock community center, or the commission center, I think, I don't know what county road it's on, that's south of 84. Someone has said that's an option for a polling place.
I think it's County Road 307 that did. I believe that's what the road number is, just right
Yes.
outside of town.
Election wise, you want your people to be not driving an excessive amount to vote. You don't want to limit anyone's vote. But we have people that live way out over in precinct 4 that are gonna have to drive into Ebony. We have people out in the Star, Carradine area that still have to drive. So this isn't an unusual amount of miles, and early voting is available for 2 weeks and sometimes 3.
Here in Goldthwaite.
Yes, here in Goldthwaite. I think this is going to be a lot of change. But I will work with whatever the commissioners decide.
Yes, ma'am. Would you use the microphone?
I'm pretty loud anyway.
Yeah, but you can't get out on the internet to our YouTube channel from being loud.
My name is Stacy Hodge. I live in precinct 2. My opinion on the matter would be that moving the fewest amount of people and modifying the budget to allow for additional roadage would probably be more beneficial to our county. If that's an option, our budget's going to be modified to allow for additional roadage. And I think that moving the fewest amount of people maintains your voting base and would probably make your populace happier. But I know that puts more work on the commissioners. However, adding to their budget may help them be a little happy.
Thank you. Yeah, that was obviously something we've thought about. The problem is it's a zero-sum game. So if you add it to one budget, you're taking it out of the other, which is okay by me. But the other part, one of our big constraints is manpower. We have 2 road hands in each precinct. So it's really difficult, and they pipe in on how many man hours it takes to do a mile of road or something.
Oh, I would say that depends on what you're actually doing to the road. We're trying to top a bunch of roads, and a mile of roads, probably 2.5 to 3 weeks worth of labor.
Or more sometimes.
So
I mean, that's rebuilding the road, not grading it, but in our precinct, we have a great need of rebuilding the roads. So,
well, let's just use that as a metric. So let's just say 2 weeks per mile. If you've already got 10 miles more than everybody else. So that's 20 weeks. That's a half a year for one person. So if we add to, the trouble is you can't move. It's hard to move or hire fractional people, but that's what we're talking about doing if we try and fine tune it based on the budget, although it is equitable and we'll have to do some of that.
And the budget too, that you might mention too, Judge, that find something new this year as far as the overtime stuff, with those road hands where they're all trying to use all the road hands for a project in a different precinct, and we don't know how that's going to work. That's something new for us.
Yeah.
But it could work, right? It could be done. We don't know yet.
Well, Judge, I think logistically and not moving many roads, J is the best way to go. I know the county clerk doesn't want to move her polling place, but none of the roads change. hardly ever Dale.
Basically just
Right,
what,
maybe wrong.
what we had talked about in that first deal was what is west of Highway 16, which
Yeah.
was a couple of small roads around Lake Merritt, 500 and 100.
2 miles.
You know,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
2 miles, you know. The area out there, and I understand the polling place and the driving, but the area out there, there's basically no county roads inside it. And there's 46
People.
people in an area with no roads. So, and it keeps you a bigger connection in the center. The other option, I think, was and we don't even show that, but that goes north of that grid.
Can you bring I up on the screen, please, Jackie?
And I don't know if you can move it to show that top part,
No, I think that's all we've
That's it.
got.
but see, that goes from the top of this area we're talking about nearly back to what connects us and out to Caravan.
So is that moving the shortest amount of people and maximizing?
I think the one that moved the least people was the G. Was it I?
It's yeah, it took 88, it moves 88 people into your precinct, which means 88 comes out of somebody else. The others range from 92 to 150.
But you're, in that one, you're increasing our road mileage pretty dramatically,
20-something miles.
probably 15 to 20 miles.
That's a whole issue. Now you just don't need more miles. I don't
Yeah.
blame you.
Well, I don't, I feel like we're struggling. Maybe it's me being a new guy and us trying to rebuild some roads. But basically, I know it was mentioned putting on another hand. If you put on another hand, you gotta have more equipment. Our equipment is kind of based for 2 hands. So, you start talking about a $295,000 maintainer. You start talking that, you start talking about insurance for an extra hand and stuff. You really start, to me, costing the county an awful lot of money to put on one hand.
Well, one thing I'd like to point out is just the time difference on these decisions. Whatever we do on the commissioner precincts is for 10 years. So this will be till the next census. The clerks pointed out a real valid issue on a number of people that'll have to vote somewhere else. But there's also over the next probably 2 years, the opportunity in the law to let people vote anywhere they want in Mills County. So you can live in Caravan, vote in Star if you want to. There's a whole lot of hurdles we have to meet to get from where we are to there. But we might be able to solve the voting problem in the intermediate term, whereas the commissioner precincts, this is a 10-year fixed and we're done type thing. Ms. Scott, did I misstate that?
No, there's a program called a countywide polling program. And we have to apply to the Secretary of State, and it would mean that anyone can vote at any polling location. We have to be approved. We have to pass a test. You can only do it in an odd number year. So we can't even apply for this until 2023. But once we get it, until we fail, the Secretary of State will allow us to do that. That means it wouldn't matter if you lived here and worked in Brownwood or worked in Gatesville. If you drive by a polling place in Mills County, you can vote there. Now, we don't have that in place yet, but we are looking into the possibility of doing that for the county, because I think it would help a lot of our people that drive to, there's people that commute to San Saba and Brownwood and Gatesville. And if we can help them where they can not have to rush back to try to get to their home location, they can vote anywhere in the county. I think it would be a good service to the citizens.
And we'll be looking into attempting this regardless of how we redistrict. Is that right?
And even if we do not do the countywide polling location, your voting precincts can be redrawn in odd numbered years. So we would still have to, I mean, we can redo our voting precincts in 2023 if we decide not to do the countywide polling location. If we need to redraw that, that's still, it's not a 10-year fix like your commissioner precincts are. There's options.
Okay, well, back, public hearing, public input, questions.
Judge? I don't know how fair it is to the public. I just want to remind the commissioner, we used to have a voting place in Milk in Mount Olive, next to at the church in Mount Olive. I don't know if it's any inconvenience for other people voting. But at the church in Mount Olive, we used to have that as a voting place.
Okay, thank you.
Right off the top of anyone's head, Sonny, you know how many people voted in that out?
I don't, but it's my understanding that the Mount Olive Church is no longer has restrooms that work, and so that's not an option. It's no longer.
It's still has family meetings there.
Okay.
So it still have work to do after.
Okay, good. And does it have, I guess, it has electricity then as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I had been informed that it was not functioning any longer. Kind of like in Center City, we moved from the Methodist church to the Baptist church for some accommodations for the poll workers. It'd be something I'd have to check into.
Other input? Yeah.
I just had a simple question, and I know you guys probably talked about this, but we're talking about road miles. Are all the roads the same? Like, is there more floodings in one or of the other districts or something like that that would cause more work than that? Maybe maintenance is more of a problem than distance of roads.
We all have issues on some of our roads that we maintain. You take precinct 4, I'm not trying to speak for Jason, but his material out there is not as good as some of ours over in the eastern and south and the northern part that we have. We have better collection. But
So the areas near the river tend to have sandier
sure.
soil and we have more trouble with the roads there.
Yeah,
And I have some of them in precinct 1 out at Double Ford in that area, and they are a little bit tougher to maintain than some of the roads I have back towards the Mullen area.
Judge, I agree with Mike. I agree with what Mike's saying. I mean, it depends on location of where that road is. Every precinct has a road though that is got a troubled spot in it, but yeah, I would agree with what Mike's saying. Anything to the west is a little more temperamental material.
For those in the courtroom, that was Commissioner Williams for precinct 4.
And we have some commissioners that, I'll say this, even though it's pointing fingers towards myself, that some commissioners work a little harder on trying to keep the roads up than other commissioners, and I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying that.
Just speaking geographically, the caliche and hard limestone seems to be more abundant, in the north and east portions of the county. And so that makes for better roads. And so we do have more trouble near the river to the west where we have the red sand. That being said, every precinct has roads that cross creeks and behind dams that have been flooded out from time to time.
In the last few years, Judge, we've addressed that issue where we're trying to put in some more low water crossings
Right.
and see them then where, they'll be permanent instead of washing out every time we have a big rain, if we ever have a big rain again. So at the present time, we have tried to improve some of our roads, all the commissioners have.
Right after we sell all the cattle that'll. Yeah.
Judge, Judge, Commissioner
Go
Williams.
ahead, Commissioner Williams, come on up.
I would like to ask a question to Commissioner Parton, which is his favorite on all these scenarios?
I think everybody knows that. I think I'm all about the minimum road mileage moving. So to me, it'd be J, but that's just cause it's gonna, road-wise, it's gonna affect our precinct less than the rest of them.
Just a note, I've been texting with Jackie, and there is an error on J, but it's not in the calculations, it's just in the detailed map. In the city of Gulfway, there is so the detailed map that you have on J, there is a line that is drawn incorrectly, but the calculations are correct. Only on the detailed map, the big map is correct.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Stacy Hodge from precinct 2. I've been thinking this whole time about, if we move lines and where we move lines to, does it, and we're used to moving polling places. We're all used to moving polling places, you know, the little round building and everything. We shut that down. Everybody moves around. I'm just wondering, and I'm not really sure that it would discourage anybody from voting anyway. I think that this county is very patriotic, but I wonder if moving these polling places to some more difficult areas for people to get to, if there's some concession in helping with transportation to get to polling. If we do come across that, is there going to be allowed a concession for ease of use for polling places? Like if you have to go to Mullen and you don't have a car, but you'd like to get there, is there?
That's where
I just
voting
didn't
comes
want
into
it
place.
to be difficult for
Right.
people.
No, I don't want it to be difficult for people either. I want, accessibility is an issue, and it's something that we're trained on, whether there's handicap accessibility.
Right.
That's why we have a touch rider, so that if you can't go around a block or you have difficulty with any type of
Well,
speech or hearing, we have things that will help with that.
well, as far as access.
As far as access though, we can't provide rides for people. There are groups I know in the past that have arranged that, but as the elections administrator, that's not something I'm allowed to do.
Right, you're not, but if it,
The county has a rural ride system.
Yes, through Hill Country Transit, it's
Yeah.
on demand. You just have to call and ask for a ride, and it, you know, I think it's a day in
we're all
advance.
used to moving our polling places around. I just didn't want to discourage voters. That was just one.
That's a really valid comment, because our turnout on elections is never outstanding. I mean,
We did very well on the November 3rd, 2020. That was a very good turnout, but we typically have good turnouts on presidential elections. The constitutional amendment election, we had a really low turnout.
Yeah, it was 14% or something.
Right at 15, I think. But so the primary, we expected a better turnout, especially with some of your local offices that are up. So, but there's also, they're already expecting at least 4 elections in 2022. The primary, the constitutional amendment election, the July runoff, and then the November election. So we're already looking at 4 elections next year.
I appreciate your comments too about keeping people from voting. Our job is to make sure they have a place to go. It's their opportunity to go out and vote.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that early voting is available. There are some things the Secretary of State and some election laws that have passed as far as like curbside voting and things like that that are not. But we try to work with anyone that comes in. There's still your absentee ballots by mail. So there's still opportunities for people to vote, either in person, by mail, early. There are options. But they also, that's part of their constitutional right, is to get out and exercise those options.
Yeah. We're still in a public hearing, or more comments from the public? Mr. Braun.
Thank you, Judge and Commissioners. it appears that there's two basic questions here. One is the impact that's going to last for 10 years, and that's the distribution of road mileage. And the other could potentially be resolved within a couple of years, allowing for more access to polling places. And so, of course, I happen to live in precinct 3. It seems to me that you need to look at the long term, big option J, because the issue of polling places could be resolved in much less time. Whereas whatever you pick on the distribution of the precincts, you guys have to live with for 10 years, or your replacement has to live with it for 10 years. And that's going to have a much larger impact on the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, input? Going once, going twice? Okay, I'm going to declare this public hearing adjourned. I appreciate everybody's input, and we will now reconvening the regular meeting of Mills County Commissioners Court. The next item on the agenda was it's audience with individuals. I'll read this right. And I have Mark Toppert has signed up to speak. Mr. Toppert, if you would, the podium is yours. The clerk will run a clock on you. Okay.
I won't go over my 5 minutes. Good morning. I would like to make clear that none of my past remarks have ever intended to be offensive or insulting to the court. I think you would agree that my presentations in court or my personal conversations with any of you have been respectful, straightforward, and cordial. Additionally, I've never accused any Mills County official of any unlawful or unconstitutional actions. With regard to the county attorney's remark that the actions of our group are political, of course they're political. The very definition of political is as follows: of, relating to, or dealing with the structure or affairs of government, politics, or the state. Every action taken by this court, by definition, is political. The county attorney should understand that. Nowhere in the resolution affirming Mills County as a constitutional county was the county attorney mentioned. He has no vote in court and was not being called upon to act in any way. Furthermore, the Texas Association of Counties, which the county attorney referenced as a resource for county officials, lists the duties of the county attorney. The duty of the county attorney listed by the Texas Association of Counties with regard to Commissioners Court, and I quote, is to provide legal advice to Commissioners Court and to other elected officials. The county attorney offered no legal advice regarding the proposed resolution. Instead, he offered a very personal political statement of opinion. Over 200 Mills County citizens signed our petition urging the adoption of the resolution. The absence of discussion or a vote by the court on the resolution has left the impression that the county attorney's personal political opinion is the opinion of the court, excluding, of course, Commissioner Wright. Judge Smith read the oath of office each of you took. His action leads many of us to believe his reasoning is that any other affirmation of the Constitution is pointless. This is simply a poor straw man argument. He attempted to refute an argument without addressing the issue. This court opens each meeting by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, a purely symbolic act each of you have repeated hundreds of times. How is signing an affirmation, a pledge, if you will, of your commitment to constitutional rights any different? Which is more important, the Pledge of Allegiance, formally adopted in 1945, or a foundational document of our country adopted over 230 years ago? I gave each of you a copy of the resolution on November 8th. Out of courtesy, I also gave one to the county treasurer and the county clerk. I also offered a copy to the county attorney, which he refused. Maybe if you'd taken a couple minutes to read the resolution, you could have reached out to me, just as Commissioners Williams and Parker. His input certainly would have been welcome at either of the two meetings the Mills County constitutional citizens had prior to the last Commissioner's Court. We would have welcomed the wisdom of his constitutional law classes or the constitutional experience he's gleaned over the course of his career. We would have greatly appreciated any instruction as to why we were out of line or how our resolution could be improved. Thus, we might have avoided the personal insult he experienced. I would hazard to guess he never read the resolution on the agenda, was not prepared for it in court. You may recall from my previous presentation that I introduced 5 principles found in the Declaration of Independence. First, the acknowledgement that there's a divine creator. Second, our rights come from God, not governments established by men. Third, governments exist to protect those God-given rights. Fourth, there is a fixed moral law. And fifth, the powers of government come at the consent of the government. In other words, our unalienable rights come from God and transcend any edicts of earthly courts or governments. The county attorney also stated, and I quote, "I learned a long time ago that the U.S. Constitution says what the United
Mr.
States."
Topper, our rules say we don't permit personal attacks. So if you would try and limit yourself
I'm not
to
attacking the
facts.
attorney. The facts are, this is what he said.
I don't mind, Your Honor, let him go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not attacking the attorney. I'm just saying the facts as he presented them and as they were in court. He said, "I learned a long time ago that the U.S. Constitution says what the United States Supreme Court says it says. Like it or don't like it, that's the law. We do not disagree with that statement where it might concern burn bans, redistricting, or laws enacted by the Texas legislature." But then, that, as he said, is reality. However, regardless of what the Supreme Court says, whether the court seeks to nullify any of our unalienable rights, the rulings are null and void. That's the reality. There's a fixed moral law and a higher power than even the United States Supreme Court. In closing, I would like to leave you with this what the Declaration of Independence says about securing our unalienable rights. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda, number 4, is consider an act on order adopting a redistricting plan for commissioner precincts. There is an order in your package with a blank. The blank is where we fill in a scenario, and we had, I think, 4 scenarios that meet the legal test of the 10% variance. You've heard the input from the public. Is there further discussion or questions from the court? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we go with Jay.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Parton to adopt scenario J.
I'll second it.
We have a second from Commissioner Gearing. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion to order redistricting based on scenario J, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Commissioner Williams, the timing of the hand
Yeah, I
raise,
just
couldn't
wanted to,
tell.
I know my vote doesn't count, but I want everybody to know that I'm voting for Jay.
Okay, had you been here and voted, we would note that, but as it stands, the vote is 4-0 to adopt precinct J, and we all need to help the clerk deal with the consequences. Next item on the agenda is consider an act on a final plat for the Rolling Oaks subdivision. It's Rolling Oaks Section 1 and Section 2, Phase 2. Yeah, this was before us in our prior meeting and lacked a perk test and the tax certificates from Lampasas Central Appraisal District, which have been provided to my office earlier this week. I see John Ed Steffen in the audience representing, or he is the developer for Rolling Oaks. So Mr. Steffen, would you like to come up and say anything?
Thank you, Your Honor and Commissioners. As you did just reference, we've provided all the necessary documentation for the planning process. And what I'm here asking for today is the conditional approval of final plat. And then when we deliver the surety bond to your office, then we will execute signatures on the plat and final plat will be recorded.
Questions from the court?
I still question, I know you've got your water lines in place, your deal with the Lomita, not Lomita Water District.
Yes.
I still, on a year-to-year basis, I still question availability of water for that many flats. Really do.
And as I stated previously in court, I'm not an engineer. I can only trust their engineers. And I would think that the size of that public utility, that they're not going to do something that they can't deliver. That's my opinion.
Thanks. Yes.
Commissioner Wright, this is in your precinct. Do you have any comments,
Well,
questions?
sir, I
Okay.
know working with Doug and John both, they've been awful good. I visited with both of them. In fact, I just visited with Doug last week out on a portion of their property, and I don't have a problem with it. If you're agree with all what's been turned in, it's good. I'll make that motion that we'll accept the rolling over section 1 and 2.
Let me try and restate the motion then, if you would consider that we approve the final plat on Rolling Oak Section 1 and Section 2, Phase 1, subject to the delivery of the required bond.
Sure. No problem.
So that's a motion from Commissioner Wright. Is there a second? I'll second it. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, 3 ayes, 1 opposed, and 1 not eligible to vote. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell me when to expect the bond?
Prior to Christmas.
Okay. Number 6, consider an act on sheriff's arrest forfeiture report. This is one I hadn't seen before. It's in your agenda. It's a form report to the Attorney General on the forfeitures seized by or held by our Sheriff's Department. Chief Deputy Green is present to address this.
Be glad to answer any questions y'all might have.
I honestly had trouble understanding the purpose of the report, and then I had a specific question on a number or two. Could you just tell us what the purpose of this is?
It's an asset forfeiture report, chapter 59. Under Code of Criminal Procedure, chapter 59 is what allows law enforcement to seize assets in certain circumstances with criminal activity. Generally, the things I hate to say limited to, but the things we usually deal with are, we seize automobiles, you'll see those going to the auction here locally, cash, things like that, they've got excess amounts of cash. They can't explain where it came from or the purpose of it. Generally, it's because they're using it for some criminal enterprise, usually buying drugs, things like that. They're either proceeds from or assets to purchase drugs. We see firearms. There's a pretty good list of things we can see. We can see real estate. We've run across instances that we could have easily seized sizable portions of land for the county, but our district attorney doesn't like that. So we're limited in what he'll allow us to do, but chapter 59 has a pretty good list. Those assets that we do seize, we have to report them in a yearly format, through the governor's office, but we report it to the Attorney General.
basically it says, all right, what did you see? It has multiple sections. It wants to know basic accounting on, because we keep a running seizure account. Wants to know what's in the account before you started the year, during the year, what's added to it. The way ours is set up, we have a deal with the district attorney's office. I don't much care for it, but that's the way it is. They split everything 50-50 with us. So if we seize money and that money is awarded to us through court, we split it within 50-50. Vehicles, pretty much the same thing, but we have to pick up the tow bill and we have to advertise it, things like that, and whatever left, we split 50-50.
Chief Deputy, this is the specific question. There was, and I'm not even sure what account. It looks like there is a expenditure and then a resulting small negative balance in the amount of the expenditure.
It's calculated within the program. I couldn't tell you the absolute specifics of it. Summer may be able to help with it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I haven't seen any negatives on the on our treasurer's reports on any of the fund balances.
What page is that, Summer?
Three of that report.
Page 13.
Right, I
Yeah.
have current balance of $4,079.60, and share forfeiture, so I'm not sure where, I don't know how. I've not seen this yet.
Okay.
I'm not sure where that report came from. That's not one I generated.
Should we ask Ms. Gerba or will she take?
That's what a sheriff gave me.
Okay. Any other questions from the court?
Something that I can explain, that there's a bit of a misnomer with this report because we will seize assets during the year that never get dealt with during that year. So it'll show that we've seized $10,000, but at the end of the year, it doesn't show anything happening with it. Now, the next year, when these cases go to court or settled in some way, then those funds will come back to the accounts. But the year that they're coming back to accounts may not show any seizure. So it's a bit of a, it's kind of confusing, but it's our government for you. So it's their calculations, it's their forms.
Yeah,
So
I take it back. I think I do remember you asking questions on expenses, things that they use the account for, but again, I don't know how it
So what we're
calculates out.
doing here is approving, I guess, the treasurer to execute jointly with the sheriff this report to the attorney general.
it's already been submitted. It's just letting y'all look at it and
Okay.
y'all be aware of it.
So we don't need to take any action on it?
So
Okay, well, that was my misunderstanding. I thought we had to.
we have to present it to you.
Okay,
Well, we just accepted that.
I think that's all we're doing.
Right.
Cool. I move we accept the sheriff's forfeiture
He may have pulled
report.
that directly from the website. That's not, when I print my working copy, that's not how it looks.
Okay,
So I'm generally, between me, Debbie and Summer, we're the ones that complete all this. It doesn't look like what we do, but that may be the official sheriff's version. I'm not sure.
so we have a motion on the floor from the county judge to accept the sheriff's asset forfeiture report. And a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Chris. Consider an act on interlocal agreement, multi-county adult sexual assault response team. There is the interlocal agreement is in your package, a little bit of background. This is what's called an unfunded mandate. There's a new bill that came through the legislature where each county has to create, its commissioner's court has to create by December 1st of this year. So here we are late. A task force consisting of a response team consisting of the following individuals. administrator of a sexual assault program, the prosecutor with jurisdiction over sexual assault, the sheriff or the sheriff's designee, the chief of the largest law enforcement agency in the county, or their designee, and either a sexual assault nurse examiner or forensic examiner for a provider to the county. So that's the requirement. Now, it also says that counties under 250,000 can combine and do joint teams. So we have been invited by Lampasas County is really taking the ball on this, but they've put together a group of Lampasas County, Coryell County, Mills County, Hamilton County, and Milam County, which is pretty close to our Council of Governments district. Through interlocal agreements by each county, we all agree to participate in one such task force. Now, the next thing that has to happen is by December of next year, the task force has to present back to the Commissioner's Court a plan of action and bylaws. So all that is going to happen in the next year, as I understand, all that is required to happen is this group gets appointed and comes back about a year from now with a report to us. So
How do other counties feel about that? They're all for it, or
I mean,
have you visited with them?
yeah, I mean, I visited with the counties that are involved
Right.
here and some of our other local counties. You know, the general feeling is this is one of those things from Austin that is an unfunded mandate that meets a need or a campaign promise somebody made. We have people fulfilling these services, and each community does it different, whether it's a rape crisis center, the Women Against Violence here in Mills County. It's called different things, but this attempts to codifies it, makes requirements, puts it on the Commissioner's Court, and requires a lot of agency participation, including prosecutors and law enforcement. So what's going to be the big negotiation among the counties is trying to identify who's working with this already and try and put them together to meet this official definition. I mean,
But we have a program here, Women Against Violence now, maybe that individual that runs. that
yes,
program
is somebody that we
Yes.
put into this. Yeah. But I mean, if you take this and try and do it just for Mills County, well, who's our prosecutor?
Right.
Well, I mean, you're going to ask Mr. Hale and the sheriff and Women Against Violence and somebody from the clinic to get together to do this because this, you know.
Did we ever want to move with Brown County? I kind of thought we did.
I've talked to the Brown County prosecutor about it. They have not done anything with regard to this law. They have, and I forget what it's called, but we fund it in our budget.
I know I was signed with
Yeah.
Lindsay Shane Britton drafted.
Yeah,
And it may have been for the advocacy. center.
yes, that is, and we do fund that with $1.50 of our license plate fees. But this, when I've talked to Alicia Bird in the prosecutor's office, is something they haven't done. They know they need to get around to it. And when they get around to it, they will invite us to participate, which honestly makes sense.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we're in non-compliance already. This agreement gives us a 45-day out. So my thinking, and doesn't cost anything, my thinking was to do this, to be in compliance. We'll do what we're required to do. If Brown County puts one together, we exit this and join Brown County. The reason Brown County makes more sense is the shared prosecutor function. Chief Deputy.
That was going to be my comments. Our prosecution is in Brown County. Our advocacy center is out of Brown County. Same nurse, all that stuff is through Hendricks, which is out in Brown County. Everything we do surrounds with Brown County as our prosecution group.
Yeah.
Probation.
That makes a lot more sense, but my conversation with Ms. Burden, it's been a month. They weren't ready to deal with this. Takes commissioner court action in Brown County. And when they get it done, I propose we'll exit this one and join that one.
This has to be completed when, January 1?
Well, I mean, it was due, I mean, the law said Commissioners Court would approve this by December 1st. It's taken me and this group of counties till now to get it on the table. So we're 13 days past due. The legal analysis is there's no penalties. So it's kind of like, okay, you're supposed to do this. We're not going to do it. We could get spanked, but that's it.
Maybe do it.
So my recommendation is we approve this interlocal agreement to come into compliance for right now.
I'll second your motion. That's your motion.
That's the motion. That's the second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Consider enacting a resolution on a joint primary for March 1st. Ms. Scott, would you explain what we're doing?
This is something that we have done in the past. The agreement comes from the Secretary of State. We do not have a Democrat Party chair in our county, but the state Democratic chair has reached out and asked us to complete this. This is something that our local Republican chair has signed in the past. It says that we will have a joint primary. It's something everyone should be familiar with. It's just re-signing that we are going to have a joint election.
And does this include that the parties then reimburse the county?
It does include that language of who's responsible for what. The ballots are paid for straight, that invoice is sent straight to the state. There's a module on the Secretary of State's website that we have to complete what our expenses are. And then they will file for reimbursement. It's something we've worked with the treasurer in the past on. All workers, we are responsible for the early voting, but the parties are responsible for the associated cost for election day.
I thought we'd had a chair for the Democratic Party here.
In years past, there was one. I don't think there's been one for 4 or 5 years.
I mean, somebody announced several years ago.
It's not on the Texas Democratic website. And the state Democratic chair reached out to counties that did not have a registered chair in that county. So we're not the only one. And it was actually brought up because in the past, I think his name has been Glenn Maxey or Macy. I have it written downstairs because there was lots on the listserv about who replaced him when he was no longer the Democratic chair for our region.
So we need a motion to approve the joint primary election services contract.
I'll make that motion, Judge.
I'll second it.
Okay, we had a motion from Commissioner Wright, a second from Commissioner Guerin. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Number 9 was to consider an act on a donation of materials. This was a TxDOT contractor that had some small leftover materials at 183 or 84 and 16 from installing light standards that he offered to the county. And we talked about it individually, and it was all pickup load type volumes and didn't appear to be worth any precincts time to move heavy equipment to the area to pick up a pickup load full of equipment.
That's where it's located. That's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
So he's gone on to try and donate it elsewhere so that we can pass on this item. There's no action to be taken. Discussion on the subdivision ordinance number 10. I'd propose we have just limited discussion on this. I edited the agreement after we discussed it in our last regular meeting. We got through about 2/3 of it. The big changes, is off the top of my head, were including the flood control drainage ways and the floodplain definition. And well, there was something else that eludes me. But then redistricting bit came in, and I haven't got anything done on it since. I've been over once the red line from the last meeting with Bobby Roundtree. He's corrected a few things. I've got that. I honestly this morning couldn't remember if I'd sent it out to everybody electronically, but I'll do that when I go downstairs. And we can either put it on the next regular meeting for discussion, try and get Bobby in here. What's left besides looking at the changes, the big thing that's left is the fee schedule. There's was a schedule of fees for everything from preliminary plat, final plat, variance request, inspections, and it tended to be denominated into a fixed fee plus so many dollars per lot. So somebody taking a piece of property and making it a 2-lot subdivision paid one amount that was relatively small. Something like we just saw that was 200 lots would be much, much larger. So my proposal would be to put it off till our next agenda for a more formal discussion. Discuss it now if somebody has something they want to add, or we can call a special meeting as early as Friday if we want to move that way.
Next regular meeting, yeah.
What is your feelings, Mr. Parkin?
I guess depends on what we end up with on the next regular meeting. I mean, if like today is entailed, I would say have a special meeting and get that, but the rest, if you can.
Well, I mean, redistricting was the elephant in the room, and we've dealt with that. The only subdivision plat we had pending was Rolling Oak, so we've dealt with that. I mean, who knows what the future may bring, but on my radar, there's no other big open issues on the table.
Yeah, the judge,
Yes,
the other issue was that simplified plats that we discussed that I
you're
don't
right.
and so, but I'm Phil with putting it on the next agenda.
Okay, and I'll make sure I'll get it out today. We'll have plenty of time. I'll make sure Bobby Roundtree is here and any of his committee that want to be present to help us with it. Okay, so I move we table the discussion of the revised subdivision ordinance. Was that a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Guerin, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, now we're down to the consent agenda. We usually do this first. I didn't want to make everybody sit through our housekeeping if they didn't want to. So here we are. First, I'll just go through these things quickly. Interject as you have any comments or questions. We have the monthly county treasurer's report and show the October balance. And there's checking accounts of rounding 1,280,000 in November, end of the month, October 31st, November 1st, 1,431,000. You see the CD balances are largely unchanged, 2.4 million beginning of the month and end of the month. And the county indebtedness is unchanged. It's limited to the remaining balance on the law enforcement bonds of 6,193,000 and change. And that will require signatures from the treasurer, the judge, and all commissioners. The report from the, see what's behind it is, oh, it's the actual activity in each of the checking accounts. The accounts payable were distributed, they were in your box, I believe, from Friday and distributed electronically. Are there any questions on accounts payable?
I do. Sorry. Yeah. They had I don't know if you call it a year-end sale, on filters that we had got a good while back. We just now got everything straight. So we had actually bought the majority of our all filters and fill filters for probably the year. So it seemed high, but
So you will have nicely filtered oil.
we will have good filtered oil.
Other questions on payables? Okay. There are summary reports from Mills County Appraisal District. This will be through the end of November. You can see tax money starting to come in with year-to-date collections of $515,000. And by year-to-date, that is October and November. So that's 2 months. And we're at 13.87% of taxes collected. They're not, don't even go past due till in January. So most of the money will come in December and January. You can still see on the uncollected report, we have 8,300 left over from last year of county tax that's uncollected. And the big number is 310,990 from the prior year, which was the Encore tax payment that's out on appeal. Commissioner Williams, had you heard anything from the appraisal district on the status of that appeal?
No, I have not. We have a meeting tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you. We have reports from our combined county and district clerk's office, and as usual, it's enlightening to see. It's about $10,000 coming in for each function. On the county clerk side, the bulk of it is coming from filing. You see recording fees of $4,200, but then record archives fee, record management fee. There's another $3,400. So right there, most of the money at the county clerk level comes from document handling. And the actual fines and fees from court up at the top are only about $1,300. There's some other court costs and fees scattered through the report. This is important because during the intermediate term future, we're going to be looking at automation proposals out of the clerk's office. So you need to see the revenue volume that's associated with document handling. On the district court side, it's the district clerk side, it's a different picture. Again, it's about $10,000 of revenue for the month, but fines, fees, and court costs are about 6,300 of it. So most of the activity on the district court side is related to our district court and our criminal activity. There's a report from tax assessor collector that's the motor vehicle report. You can see collections of 140,000 for the month with 19,700 retained by the county. On the Ag Life report, it's our extension agent, a little over 200 miles traveled during the month. The biggest part of that was a district conference, and upcoming for the month, you can see that it's largely related to handling stock show entries, as well as I believe that was the San Angelo Judges and Commissioners Conference, which was put on by Ag Life. The Sheriff's Department monthly report is in here. Total calls 267. Sheriff's calls component of that is 187. EMS is about 20% of it, 55. The rest is everything from game warden to fire department to DPS. Civil process serving of 12. We've got Sheriff's Department arrest of 5, and then jail housing at the bottom, $19,850, with the bulk of it, $15,700, coming from Coryell County, but little bits from San Saba, Bell, and Hamilton. The JP's report it's the usual 4-page report from the state, lots of volume, a little bit difficult to read. Line 2 is new cases filed, 31 traffic misdemeanors and 29 other cases disposed, 44 on the traffic side, 15 on the other, and then cases at the end of the month down on line 12, approximately 1,900, actually 1,780 traffic and 209 other. The second page, civil, you can see new cases filed, debt claims primarily, cases disposed of, the small claims court and debt claims, and cases active at the end of the month. The juvenile report continues to be 0. And on the last page, some other activity, 12 magistrations at the county jail. Of those 12, 2 asked for county paid counsel, with 1 protective order issued, 1 inquest conducted, and at the very bottom, there's the money, $16,454 fees, with $10,600 in change being retained by the county. A report from the judge's office, activity was largely limited to senior center rental and septic permits. Just for education, I've run the last 3 years sort of running the septic revenue totals. I was thinking we were seeing a big jump in 2021 in septic activity. It's slowed down last month, and I don't know where December is going to be, but it looks like it's more likely to be very close to 2020 levels of about $9,500 in septic revenue, but still that's twice what we were seeing in 2019. And that is a proxy for the next step of the development activity. People buy the lot, but then they build the septic system when they're ready to use it. We have reports here from EMS. The first report is the in-city calls. The second one is the out-of-city. And see the average response times, about 5.5 minutes in the city and 11 minutes in the county, and they're meeting our minimums, or average minimums, 88% of the time. There's a couple of areas in the western part of the county that they just seem unable to make in the 20 minutes, but that's why it's a minimum across, an average across the county. A report from our veteran service officer, Craig Wright. See, it's worked on 24 veterans affairs during the month. It's spent 61 hours on it, and a great deal of detail. And I believe Mr. Wright continues to be a great service to our local veterans. And that is all we have on the departmental reports. If there are any questions or comments, or we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion, we accept the consent agenda.
We have a motion to accept the consent agenda from Commissioner Wright. Is there a second?
I'll say,
I saw a hand wave from Commissioner Parker. Let him take credit for that one. So motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, commissioners request and reports. Commissioner Wright.
I met with 4 different landowners for replacing tin horns in the precinct. One landowner I met with about the right of way. We've been trimming trees, cleaning out tin horns on County Road 429, 423, and 412. And also attended the conference in San Angelo, the Ag Conference. So I am good.
Thank you.
We've basically been cleaning out tin horns all over the precinct. Somebody says it's gonna rain one of these days. We're trying to be prepared, but I don't know when. That's about all we've done.
Hey, the main thing might be prepared for the next price increase on tin horns. Commissioner Barton.
Hadn't been cleaning out town horns. I'm gonna wait for a rain, see if it'll wash them out. We've been hauling dirt on 508. Also attended commissioners meeting in San Angelo. I thought it was a very good meeting. And nothing to do with the food, but the meeting was good too. So that's about all we got.
Commissioner Williams.
Yeah, so first I'd like to thank everybody for keeping me in their prayers and stuff this last week. That was pretty brutal. I understand what all you other commissioners have gone through with this COVID. My guys have been pretty heavy cleaning out culverts, as some of you other precincts are. We're also got the rock crusher back. When we got the rock crusher back, there were several other issues that arose on it. We've maintained those. Kirby Moore has had to order parts, so it's been down in and out, but it is up and going and been working for the last week. So we're using that. Also, still working on talking to the camera system. Some of that stuff has changed on the swinging bridge, but we're still on that process right there, talking with them out there in the Regency area. Have missed 2 board meetings last week due to being sick, but I have been officially released from the doctor, and so MCAD meeting is tomorrow night, and I think that's it on meetings this week, unless you call another one. And that's my report.
Thank you. This last week, too, actually was all redistricting all the time, but we've killed that enough. COVID has picked up in the county. I think as everybody's noticed, after a fairly benign and very hopeful month of November, December started off with 5 to, in some cases, 15 new cases a day. It's been crazy. It has in some point been concentrated in some young children. So hopefully it's very mild, but it's a concern. It's a whole different picture than a month ago. The courthouse lights are up, the Christmas lights, and on the jail, Gab Burns did an excellent job and turned in some overtime on supervising and getting all that done. We had 2 contractors go in at once, roofing on the community center and the old jail, and some tin work here on the courthouse while we were doing lights. It was quite a bit of logistics. But that is behind us. The lighting bills come through. The roofing bill will probably show up shortly. What hasn't happened will be a January project, will be the windows and the window frame replacement. The insurance company did a little bit of a 180 on us in the last couple of weeks. Rather than rent one lift for a period of 6 weeks for the whole process, which would have been cheaper, they decided to let each contractor bid and be reimbursed for their own lift to avoid contractors being able to claim scheduling delays caused by fights over who got to use the lift, and also avoid or fixed responsibility for damages as to whose lift it was. So that's happened. The insurance company has advanced us a little over six figures that the treasurer has on deposit. So as we pay the bills now, it's coming out of the insurance proceeds, even though it's processed. You'll see it coming through accounts payable. But the deductible on this was absorbed last year. That's all I have. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
What?
Dale was the second.
Dale seconded. Commissioner Guerin made the motion. We all voted for it. We're adjourned.